let's get into it. Make sure you have something to write with if you are handwriting your notes and then typing them in. Otherwise, if you are typing directly into your interactive notebook, make sure you have that open too, okay? So we have taken a look at a variety of different things lately. We looked at the European countries that colonized North America, Spanish, French, Dutch, and most importantly for American history, British. We looked at the 3 different regions of those British colonies. We looked at the southern colonies, mainly Jamestown and its expansion into Virginia, the lower South colonies, which are your 2 Carolinas and Georgia. And we looked at the New England colonies, primarily the Massachusetts Bay Colony. We looked at the middle colonies as well, right? And we did all that between Thursday of last week and yesterday when I posted my lecture video and you were asked to work asynchronously because of all of our technological problems and issues, right? So you should have finished your notes on 1.2 yesterday. That was part of your assignment for yesterday. I said that in multiple ways and multiple times over and over again. So you should have gotten that and taken care of that. In looking at those two particular regions, we're going to look at Virginia and New England. When you compare those 2 regions, you've got to think about why they were each independently settled and founded, and where that took them. So when you look at New England versus Virginia, right? New England is going to be settled by families, where Virginia is primarily settled by a lot of white single men. In New England, you have families, you have a focus on religion, because that's where your Puritans and your separatists came over. Your Pilgrims, they all came to New England. Virginia, there's no focus on religion there at all. And in fact, their focus is on money, honey, okay? So Virginia is all about money, which means that in terms of how they're going to make that money, it's going to be through cash crop agriculture, the harvesting of large plantations, the use of slave labor. It's majority male, and you have very low life expectancy in Virginia as well, comparatively speaking to New England, where you have these families, you have religion, you have smaller farms that are focused on subsistence farming, and people are living longer in New England too. So that is definitely something to keep in mind and remember as we move into what life is like in the British colonies. All right. So Southern New England, middle colonies, incredibly different from each other, yet they do share some common traits, particularly when you look at what you can abbreviate as PES, political, economic, and social characteristics. So that is essentially what we're going to look at today. We're going to look at colonial government. We're going to look at colonial economics. We're going to divide Southern economy and Northern economy. And then social characteristics will focus on colonial religion. So government in the colonies, all of them are governed with this policy of salutary neglect, which should not be new to you because I have said it at least, this is the 3rd time at least, which I've talked about salutary neglect. I talked about it at the end of my lecture on 1.1, Age of Exploration. I talked about it in my lecture on 1.2 when we talked about the Virginian colonial government. And here I am talking about it again. So if I've mentioned something 3 times, I want to clue in on that ding, 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 that's something to remember. That is an important concept that you need to understand. So salutary neglect. The colonies are controlled by Great Britain and the British Crown and the king, right? The king of the time. But with salutary neglect, it means you're not enforcing those policies. Think about that word neglect, right? It means you're leaving something alone, or you're not paying attention to it. So the British Parliament and king are going to control those colonies, but they don't enforce the policies as long as Great Britain is profiting. Great Britain says, hey, you know what? We're making money. That's fine. We don't need to fix it if it ain't broke. Okay, as long as Great Britain profits from the colonies, then they are fine and they're happy. The king is happy if he's making money. And each colony had its own royal governor, which was appointed by the British Crown. But this person's salary is paid by the colonists. So you got to think about that. They're not worried about these local laws. They know where they're getting paid from. They know where they're getting their salary from, where their money from. So they're not going to overturn local laws if they don't absolutely, have to. So they completely understand where their bread is buttered on. So salutary neglect, an incredibly important concept here. It's a matter of loose control. It allows these colonies to create their own colonial assemblies. This is a form of democratic self-government. They can pass their own laws, they can pass their own taxes, and they feel good about passing those laws and taxes because the men in the colonial assembly are elected to those positions. Now, keep in mind that the men in the colonial assembly are rich, white, and male, and the only people that are able to vote are rich, white, and male. So they're only representing a certain aspect of colonial society, that aspect being rich, white, and male. However, these people are still being elected. When you think back to 8th grade and the beginnings of our country and the American Revolution, there's this one big phrase that like really encompasses all of the American Revolution, the number one reason why we seem to be pissed off. Can anybody tell me what that phrase is? It has to do with taxes and
No taxation without representation.
exactly, right? No taxation without representation. That's what we like, that's our battle cry. Okay, no taxation without representation. We're not being represented in Parliament back here in Great Britain. But here in the colonial assemblies, you have that representation. So we're fine with these people passing laws. We're fine with these people passing taxes. And again, right, typically those colonial assemblies, kind of already mentioned that, they're controlled by those wealthy landowners. So some examples of that are going to be the House of Burgesses in Virginia. And then in Massachusetts, where the focus is on religion, those town meetings, those church meetings. Now, economics in the colonies are incredibly important, okay? They are a very large part of the transatlantic trade network, which is essentially what you can end up calling the triangular trade, this movement back and forth like a triangle from Great Britain to North America, Africa, North America, Great Britain, etc. Okay? So there are a couple things that we need to understand from the transatlantic trade, and that is, what is each of these places, these three corners here to this triangle trade, what are each of these places offering to the other, right? So the colonies, they are offering raw materials. This is where you get your tobacco, your indigo, your flour, your lumber, your whatever, okay? This is raw materials. The thing is, in the colonies, they don't have what it takes. They don't have the industry to turn those raw materials into manufactured goods. So they harvest these raw materials, they put them on a ship, and they send them to Great Britain. And in Great Britain, they have the industry to harvest or to turn these raw materials into manufactured goods, into products, okay? And then once they've turned them into finished products, they put those products on a ship and they send them right the heck back to North America and the colonies, where the colonists buy those products. So this is a market for Great Britain, right? This is a great market for Great Britain. In terms of Africa, what does Africa play in this triangular trade? That is slaves as labor, right? White Europeans come into Africa. They will take Africans captive, put them on a boat. We're going to watch a short video today, just a clip here, where it talks about how typically slaves were brought first to the West Indies, where they were, quote, all right, I'm doing air quotes if you can see me, seasoned, meaning that they were put through absolute 100% hell in order to break them. And then from there, they were taken to North America, right? So as you see an increase in the demand for these raw materials, you are going to see an increase in the demand for African slaves as well. So this back and forth here of sending raw materials to Great Britain and getting manufactured goods created and bringing them back to the colonists is incredibly important. And it is a large part of what makes Great Britain so much money. So here are some examples of the leading colonial exports by 1770. At that time in the South, it's going to be tobacco, right? They will also export rice and indigo. Indigo will be used as like a dye as well for clothing, for textiles. And when I talk about like raw materials and finished goods, you have to think about it this way. The clothes that you're wearing, are those raw materials or are those finished goods?
Finished.
Exactly, right? Those are manufactured goods, okay? What is the raw material that gets you that manufactured good, that gets you the clothes you're wearing, your Adidas shirt and Nike shorts, whatever? It's cotton, right? It's that textile. It's whatever that raw material is that you're getting out of here. So that's just a quick note. So we really understand the difference between raw materials and finished goods. So the middle colonies are going to export wheat. The middle colonies get labeled the breadbasket of America. And then when you look at New England, fish and whale oil are their leading colonial exports. Whale oil used as like in lanterns as a fuel for lights. All right, so we mentioned this increased demand for raw materials is going to increase the demand for African slaves. This is where you get your triangular trade from America, Europe, and Africa. And for Great Britain in particular, this is where Great Britain is going to embrace what we call mercantilism. This is an incredibly important economic policy that you need to understand when it comes to the relationship between Great Britain and the colonies, okay? Mercantilism is all about colonies, right over here, existing simply to make money for the mother country, for Great Britain, all right? Mercantilism is the idea that colonies only exist to generate wealth for the mother country. So when you think about mercantilism, I always, on the board, I draw like a big M and I write mercantilism, money, mother country, right? Mercantilism, money, and mother country. I'm going to put that in the chat. So this balance of trade, right, in which a nation is going to export more than it imports. Exporting means that you're selling more things than you're buying. So the more that Great Britain gives to the colonies in terms of manufactured goods and selling those things off, the more money that they make. And because the raw materials are coming from the colonies and Great Britain owns those colonies, they can get them without all the extra necessary tariffs and taxes that you would get if you were buying these raw materials from another country entirely. Remember, the colonies are simply an extension of England in that sense. But what's going to end up happening is that that policy of salutary neglect is going to really come back and kind of bite Great Britain in the butt here, because as they focus more on mercantilism, they're going to want to control and regulate colonial trade a lot more. So what happens is mercantilism is going to lead to the Navigation Acts. Again, incredibly important aspect here, the Navigation Acts. So these are a series of laws. If you see the word act, it's a law of some kind, a tax or a law being passed that gives a tax, whatever. So the Navigation Acts are meant to restrict colonial trade and increase British wealth. It requires particularly colonists to only trade with Great Britain. So here are a couple of different examples of the Navigation Acts. Is no country could trade with the colonies unless the goods were shipped in either colonial or English ships. That is going to give them some extra money there, right, in terms of any other country trading with the colonies. All vessels had to be operated by crews that were at least 3/4 English or colonial. Colonies could export certain products only to England. England said, hey, this product, say it's tobacco, indigo, and cotton. You can only sell those products to England. You can only export those items to England. Right? Huge part of the economy when you think about tobacco. To only be restricted to England is definitely controlling and would definitely have an impact on the colonial economics as well. And then this part, almost all goods traded between the colonies and Europe first had to pass through an English port. So if for any reason, say there was a merchant in France who was going to sell in the colonies, they had to set sail from France, stop at an English port in England, and then continue across the Atlantic Ocean. The reason there being is that by stopping at that English port, you can exact a tax, you can exact a duty, a tariff on that trade. All 13 of the British colonies participate in the Atlantic trade, the transatlantic trade, but there are some very big regional differences between the southern and northern colonies, and that is going to lead to incredibly long-term division. Right here, right now. We haven't even gotten to the American Revolution. We're not even our own country yet, and we are already setting up the steps that take us to the Civil War. Right here, just because these economies are so different and you have these regional differences. We are not even a country yet, and we are already laying down the foundation to fight each other. Okay, I always think that's incredibly interesting. So in the north, you have a more industrialized economy, a more industrialized society, and in the south, it is agricultural. And because the south is agricultural, because the entire economy of the south depends on that agriculture, and depends on the backs of slave labor, when it comes to the issues of slavery, when that becomes a big issue later on down the road between the two regions, the South is going to obviously fight tooth and nail to maintain that, okay? Don't let anybody tell you, do not let a single person tell you that the Civil War was about anything other than preserving slavery for the South. If some redneck in Alabama tells you it was about states' rights, you look them in the eye and you say, no, it wasn't, right? It was about slavery. It was about a state's right to maintain slavery, okay? So please keep that in mind. I'm very passionate about that. It bothers me when people try to make us look better than we are, and we're really not. So it's definitely, you'll hear more about that when we get to the Civil War. But think about this, you know, when we're already here, we're already setting the stage, basically. So the southern economies, right? What do those southern economies look like? It's cash crop agriculture, starts with tobacco, will eventually become cotton. Cash crop agriculture, you have more plantations than you have cities. You have these large swaths of land, these acres upon acres of plantation. You have a very large gap between the rich and the poor, not just between those wealthy landowners and the slaves that they own, but just also between those wealthy landowners and other, say, backcountry farmers, white farmers who didn't have those large plantations. You obviously have the use of slaves and indentured servants as the labor force. However, by 1676, when Bacon's Rebellion kicks off and the rich Virginian landowners realize, hey, maybe it's better for us, meaning those rich Virginian landowners, maybe it's better for us if we move to a dominant labor force of slaves, indentured servitude will definitely start to die off here. All right, so Bacon's Rebellion, that's that number one event that encourages the rich landowners to move to slavery rather than the use of indentured servants. And when you're talking about these rich landowners, English colonists are typically the ones who make up the plantation owners in the very nutrient-rich lands in the east, meaning that all of this land that's, you know, kind of closer to the coast is very rich. It's good for farming. It's a really great land for them. So they get the good stuff, right? They get all the good stuff. The backcountry farmers, your poorer farmers, those are going to be former indentured servants, Irish immigrants, German immigrants who move out to this backcountry all along this border here, the Shenandoah Valley, etc. Very poor soil. It's definitely not as great. Plus, there's the fact that if you notice here, this is where you are closer to Native American troops that the colonists have pushed out that way, right? So they're closer to Native Americans. They have to deal with attacks in terms of that. And they typically live in poverty there as well. When you look at slavery in the South, obviously it's far more common in the South than it is in the northern colonies, but do not let anybody tell you that the North was this free, utopian, beautiful place. It was not, okay? But if you take a look at this map, or I'm sorry, this graph, it shows you the difference in populations, white and black in the colonies in 1750, right? So if you're looking at Massachusetts, 2%. If you're looking at, say, like Virginia, all right, you're talking about 44%. So obviously large differences here. 80 to 90% of Southern slaves were field workers. They worked mostly on plantations. You have to remember that the enslaved peoples that were brought over here, they came from various origins in various countries. Africa is a continent. It's got a ton of different countries, okay? Just because you're from Africa doesn't mean that you come from the same country that somebody else from Africa does. Doesn't mean you speak the same language. These people are all from different origins, different languages, and different cultures. But that's not how the white slave owners looked at them, you know. So here it shows you how the number of slaves have increased, right? From, look at 1701 to 1810, we're talking about over 6 million, just over 6 million. Like I mentioned, right, various origins, various languages, various cultures. Slaves would use music and dance to maintain their African culture. They often blended African rituals with Christianity. And even though you might have marriages, they were not recognized by the owners or any kind of authorities. And as I mentioned, right, religion was often blended, those African rituals and Christianity. Variety of ways that slaves could resist. One is slowing down work, sabotaging equipment, and then, of course, through armed resistance. So this is a rebellion that you probably have never heard of before. If you have, that's really good. The Stono Rebellion was a kind of one of those things you don't learn about in history kind of things. I like to make sure I get as many across as I can. Largest slave insurrection in British North America. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you guys this quick video that shows you kind of walks you through the story about the Stono Rebellion. So we're just going to watch a little bit. She does a really good job. She's just storytelling. That's it. She's just telling you about the Stono Rebellion. Okay, so we're going to watch this. I'm going to skip a little chunk in the middle and then end it. We won't watch the whole thing.
Story is actually of the Stono Rebellion, and I don't think, in my head, the Stono Rebellion isn't something that's not well known, because more and more people are becoming aware of it. But I know there was a time when people didn't know about the Stono Rebellion. So the Stono Rebellion took place in South Carolina. Basically, there was this enslaved man. He was new.
Real quick, she put the wrong date up there. That's 1739.
Newly brought to the U.S. From Congo, it's believed, and his name is.
Also, she does have a couple things wrong here, but some research has found out that they believe he's actually from Angola and not from Congo. But those are two things just to think about.
Jimmy, J-E-M-I, Jammy. It's like Jammy, right? Okay. So, anyways, and he wasn't seasoned, okay? So a lot of times when slaves were brought over, they would be taken to the Caribbean first, where they would get seasoned, which means basically they went through hell and high water. They beat all sense of hope out of them before they would sell them on to, you know, up north and to other places or whatever. But Jimmy came straight over, and he was very unhappy with his state. He was like, this is not going to happen. Like, we've got to get out of here. And he managed to lead an insurrection. So it was a Sunday when he chose, you know, he got a couple of people who were enslaved on the same plantation with him, and they decided to do this insurrection on Sunday. We're going to take over on Sunday. So this is the point when I ask my students, why do you think it was on Sunday? Go ahead. Answers. Okay, it was on a Sunday because Sunday is when white people would go to church. And Sunday was the one day that enslaved persons had to take care of themselves, to relax. It was like their one rest day. And so they did not have a heavy eye on them. And so Sunday was the day that, you know, you could get away with stuff. So Sunday, everybody's at church, and he gets a couple of people from the plantation he's on, and he's like, all right, we're going down to this gun shop. There was a shop where a man and his son, they sold guns and ammunitions and things like that. They were there at the shop. So Jimmy and the other insurrectioners, I don't know, they basically broke in and they took guns, and they had machetes because the machetes are used for, you know, crops and stuff, and they beheaded the father and his son, and put the heads, outside as a warning. So from there, they had this plan that they were going to go south to Florida, because Florida at this time was owned by Spain, and if you could get to Florida, you were free, right? So they took, oh man, I gotta figure out, I used to know like which really hurt. They're going down this main road, and as they come across different plantations, they're recruiting people like, hey, join our cause. If we're a big old group, we can get away. We can get to freedom in Florida. Basically they were recruiting people as they went along, so the group got bigger and bigger. Anytime they came across white people, they were killing them. And mostly it was like women and children who had stayed home from church. And so they were, when I say they were killing them, they were beheading them. Like they were ruthless with it. Like, look, this is a warning. We ain't playing. We are getting out of here, and we're taking no prisoners. They're killing everybody. So finally, word got out to the marshals, right? And so a group of them came and met them on the highway. And, it was about 60 at this time, 60 runaway enslaved persons. And they killed every one of them. They weren't just beheading them this time. They were shooting them, whatever. They killed everybody except for one young boy who got away. Word is somebody let him get away. I don't really know. Anyways, he managed to get away. And he got away and got a hold of the militia. So the militia came in. They now had like the military. And they were 30 miles from the border, of Florida. They were so close to me. Like they could have got there.
All right. So real quick, good overview about the Stoner Rebellion. Tells you, I does a really good job at just kind of storytelling it. And that's what history is, guys. History is just storytelling. So, very, very good job at telling about the Stoner Rebellion. So you have access to these slides. If you want to watch that again, watch or talk to you guys about that again, you can do that. All right. We're going to take a look at the Northern economy now and then wrap it up with colonial religion. So the Northern economy is much more diverse than the South. They don't have all their eggs in one basket. Okay. They are not only focused on agriculture. So Northern farms were typically small. They grew a lot of different crops, like things like wheat and corn, and they had livestock as well. And then they were also more industrial. So they focused more on things like lumber and shipbuilding and fishing and ironworks, things like that as well. So they have a much different economy than the South. And you have to remember that in places like Boston, Philadelphia, and New York, some of the most important ports for international trade are in the New England and Middle colonies. And the northern cities are going to give people more professional opportunities, more trade opportunities than anywhere else in the colonies, because you don't have these large plantations and these big old acres and swaths of land. You have more opportunity to create cities in the north than you would in the southern colonies. And again, a reminder that slavery does exist in northern colonies. In the north, slaves are going to work on small farms or either be domestic servants. And then just like in the South, any kind of like English indentured servant, any kind of former indentured servant, or German and Irish immigrants, they'll live on this back country. Think about this line, this black line right here. They'll live in this back country, small scale farmers. Okay. Now we're going to look at the last part of our PES here, political, economic, and social, and that is religion. All right. So we know that at a certain point in time in the 1600s, the Puritans are going to have to like give out a compromise to people. Church membership declines, and they're like, hey, that's no bueno. We need to get people back to church. So here's the halfway covenant, right? You can have full church membership even without experiencing some kind of conversion. Just come on back to Jesus, y'all, is basically what the halfway covenant is, okay? Well, by the 1700s, church attendance in the colonies had declined even more. So in the 1730s and the 1740s, what you have is this first truly great American event. It's the first truly American event in our nation without it being a nation yet. and that is the Great Awakening. So preachers are going to use revivals to encourage religious conversions. This is where you get your fire and brimstone preaching. This is where you get people standing on the pulpit, screaming at you, yelling at you, talking to you about sin and how you're all sinners, but Jesus loves you anyway, etc., etc. Okay, so you have preachers like Jonathan Edwards and George Whitefield. They are very popular evangelists. Right here, this is a link to a Hamilton song. In case you didn't know, Jonathan Edwards was the grandfather of Aaron Burr, and Aaron Burr was a vice president of the United States under Thomas Jefferson, and Aaron Burr is who shot and killed Alexander Hamilton in a duel. So that's just a little aside there. So Jonathan Edwards, George Whitefield, two big popular evangelists. And the Great Awakening is going to even give us new religious denominations, right? So here's an excerpt from Jonathan Edwards. The God that holds you over the pit of hell, much as one holds a spider or some loathsome insect over the fire, abhors you and is dreadfully provoked. His wrath towards you burns like fire. He looks upon you as worthy of nothing else but to be cast into the fire. And yet it is nothing but his hand that holds you from falling into the fire every moment. Sinners in the hands of an angry God. So God's angry at you. He's angry at your sin. And it is only by his grace that you don't continue falling into that pit, basically. So very passionate, very fiery, right? It's ideas of camp revivals. They're meeting, out in the middle of a field rather than in a specific church, a building. Like I mentioned, they're going to lead to new religious denominations. This is where we get Methodists and Baptists, and this is your first national American event. Okay, it took place in all of the colonies, and really, if anything, united the colonies at this time, it would be the Great Awakening. Okay, I'm going to show you your assignment for today. It is in your Canvas modules. Let me move that over real quick. Here you are on your slides. If you click next twice, this is just 1.3a is just an extra thing for you if you need to look over that. But this is your assignment for today, examining life in the British colonies via primary resources. So it says examine the primary resources below, explain how they relate to the American colonists. You can give me bullet points, that's fine. But just please be sure that you reference both excerpts. So I gave you an example. You can tell me Pinckney's excerpt explains how American colonists, and then fill in the blank, finish that sentence out, give me some more information. So this is that excerpt from Lucas Pinckney. And then the second one is from Nehemiah Grew. So Grew's excerpt explains how American colonists did what, right? Explain how each of these quotes relate to the American colonists. I gave you a website for some more background information on Eliza Pinckney. And here, I kind of gave you a little bit of a clue when it comes to this particular quote. In the above excerpt, Nehemiah Grew is a British mercantilist. Okay, so he is all about mercantilism. He is all about the colonies making money for the mother country. And he is voicing some concern. He says, the time may come when colonies may become populous, forget their relation to the mother country, and will consider nothing further than the means to support their ambition on their own legs. He is saying the time may be coming here, guys, when the colonies don't want anything to do with us, when they want to be self-governed, self-determined, when they may very well want to be their own country. So I gave you a little bit of a clue to help you out in distinguishing this particular quote, okay? Due today, August 25th, unless yours says differently, and you would see that. And then August 27th is how long it is open. So remember, I will leave assignments like this open 2 days past their due date for late submissions. After those 2 days, you're done. Okay. I will, just a reminder, right, that you want to make sure that your notes get put into your interactive notebook. So this is 1.1 Age of Exploration, which we did last week. Hopefully you've already put those in there. This is my notes on 1.2, Southern New England Middle Colonies. And then here you have Life in the British Colonies, 1.3, right? Well, notice I do some focusing on things like mercantilism and salutary neglect and the Navigation Acts and the differences between the two economies, and the Great Awakening being an important aspect of British life as well. Okay.